Welcome.
Never clap ahead of time. What if I'm bad? How do you take it back, all right? My name is John Daly. I do teach at the University of Texas. I teach a couple MBA classes as well as a couple PhD classes. One of my MBA classes is called Advocacy. Advocacy is about how you successfully sell an idea within an organization. How many recognize that UK there's a politics to ideas? Some ideas go far, some don't, and I'm really interested in what it takes to be successful marketing one's ideas. The other course I teach is something called Leadership Challenges. In that class, I'm interested in one very simple but I think critical question. How come some people are more successful than other people within organizations? How come some people skyrocket to the top and other people get stuck in the middle? Let's be clear, not everyone wants to succeed. Some people simply want a job to be able to afford to live. But some people want to climb that proverbial ladder of success. Footnote, there is no ladder, it's an extraordinarily greasy pole. My methodology is very simple. I go to very successful people and say, how come you're here? How come you're here and not somebody else? Now, some will say I'm here because my mother created the company. Fair answer. Some will say no one else wants this job. Somebody has simply step up and take responsibility. I may go push it, because I don't believe for 1 second anyone turns down $30 million and a Gulfstream 6 jet. Most look out the windows. They all have windows, by the way. And they say something like this: I had extraordinary vision. I can never help but ask at that moment, which drug? I had some good visions in college, all right? But I wanted the president of the University of Kentucky to come in every morning and say, I had a vision last night. After a few days, it began to bother me. So they begin to tell you really interesting things that when you hear them, you go, of course, but I'm not sure you'd come up with them yourself. For example, never take a job where the guy before you's done great. Follow a loser. Says the poor Tim Cook at Apple. How do you recover from Steve Jobs? Who's my soccer fans? Any soccer fans here? Why would Moynes ever follow Ferguson? It makes no sense whatsoever, right? Well, another one, never join a really successful unit. Never join a successful project. Projects operate on waves. If you join at the top, guess what? It's going to crest. If you join from the bottom, you're likely to ride it up. One of the most important ones, and every one of these guys say this is absolutely essential, and they say most people make this mistake. Stop negotiating with yourself. Every one of these guys say the biggest mistake most of us make is we talk ourselves out of opportunities. Who would like to buy a nice car if money were no issue whatsoever? What kind of car would it be, sir? Aspirational, what would it be? Tesla. New one or the old one? Oh, very good. How much does it cost, by the way? I wouldn't know. What do you think? $70,000. Very good. Now, UK has an extraordinary year for some odd reason, okay, financially. All right? You get huge bonuses. In your case, you get $60,000 in cash in a paper bag, the environmental right thing to do. All right? Now, you're driving home that night, you go by a local Tesla office, okay? I'm sure you have one in your neighborhood. There's your car of your dream with 70K soap in the window. What's the mistake most of us make? We keep driving. We don't have the money. What do every one of these successful people say you have to do every time? You got to walk in with your paper bag of money. I got $60,000. Do you want to give me that car for that amount of money? Now, most of the time, they'll laugh and kick you out. But who knows? They haven't sold a car for the last 6 weeks. There's weird sales competition going in. Look, I can 100% guarantee you won't get the car if you don't go in. At least a small chance you get the car if you go in. If you want the promotion, if you want the training, if you want the trip, you got to ask for it. Who's my academics here? You got to submit stuff for publication. Always work from the top down, right? What's the worst thing I do? Reject it, you go to over. But some guys say they'll never publish it, so why even try? That's crazy. Indeed, in my MBA class, I have an assignment that drives my students absolutely nuts. Once a week, they got to ask for something. They got to be brave and ask for something they know they couldn't get. What's an example? Who's ex-military here? Any ex-military people here? Home Depot will give you a 10% discount automatically if you simply ask for it, right? They ask for no ID, just say ex-military. What happens, they'll give you. If you don't ask, it's not going to happen. One of my favorite, always in retail places, ask. Why not ask? So one assignment, get them, go to a retail establishment and ask for something you're not going to get. Go to the movies, all right? Get a box of popcorn. They're bringing out, you say, it's kind of a small box. Can I have a little bigger box? But I got no more money. Who's worked retail? You don't care that much. Sure, why not? All right? If you don't ask, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to ask. You got to learn to ask. Now, some of these are small behaviors, equally important. This is a classic behaviors us academics call asymmetric behaviors. Do them right, no one even notices. Do them wrong, they become problematic. So we meet for the first time. What do we say? Nice to what? Never again as long as you live. How could you forget me? I thought we had this great relationship. Who's made the mistake of saying nice to meet you and somebody says, don't you remember, went to school together, hooked up last weekend? It comes back to haunt you, doesn't it? What do you want to say instead? Good to see you. How are you doing? Nice to you, right? You'll see no really successful leader ever say nice to meet you. They'll say it's nice to see you, good to see you, how are you doing, something like that. Because if you do it wrong, there's a drama. Who's actually created that drama before unintentionally by saying nice to meet you? Absolutely. What's another one of these things? Who's married here? Who's married? Who has a partner? Husband's name is? David. And your name is? Lori. Haven't seen you a while. How are you doing? Great. How's David? He left me for Lori. I don't need that kind of drama. I don't care that much, but now I got to fake like I care for 20 minutes. Sigh, get you a cup of coffee, say how horrible it is, what a scum she is. All right, check with you tomorrow. I don't care. Don't ask about spouses or jobs when you haven't heard from somebody for a while. Because all you do is get a drama sometimes, right? What do you say instead? What's new in your world? What's up? What's new in your world works just as well and lets them choose whatever they want to do. One of my favorite ones, and it's somewhat generational, but it's an issue, I think, on my campus at least. I'm sure it's this year on your campus too. You work on an extraordinary project. You spend weeks or months working on this project. It takes up your entire life, it seems, for weeks. You finally give the final work product to your boss, and she says, fantastic job, thanks so much. What's the mistake a lot of people make? At that moment, they say, no problem, no worries. That's just stupid. It was a problem. You had no life. Stop dismissing your own work. When your boss says, great job, thank you, what you should say in response is what? Thank you, you're welcome. Never dismiss your own labor. Now, all these guys tell me the really big secret to being a leader is two things. Number one, you got to get work done. And getting work done is these guys work incredibly hard. How many think I'm right about that? You worked at Reuters for a while. These guys, the top guys, work harder than you can ever imagine. But that's only one dimension. The other dimension is they got to be admired. People got to want to work for them. Look, nowadays you can't measure how much work people can do. Or you know how little they can do, but you have no idea how they can peak out. So the leaders we focus upon in our research are what we call admired leaders. People who get work done, but are also deeply admired by the people who work with them. So and far, the downside of this is when the leader decides to leave, they want to join that person. Who's had a boss that good at least once? They leave someplace, you say, there's a job, let me know. I'd go with you. Who's had the opposite kind of boss? They decide to leave, you help them pack up to move. All right? So I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 things we've discovered about these admired leaders. 3 or 4 things that seem to make a huge difference in how they work with people every day. Number 1, they're trusted. Great leaders are deeply trusted. How many think trust is absolutely crucial in any relationship? Lose it, you never get it back completely, do you? Now, trust used to be a simple thing. We've actually discovered it's a much more complex thing than you think it is. There are actually 5 very distinct variables that create trust. If you blow any one of these things, you're not getting back. One is reliability. We love reliable people. We love reliable people. Who's my managers here? You have 2 people coming to work each day, okay? Person number 1 is late 8 minutes every day. You can set your watch the second down the 8 minutes every day late. Person number 2 is on time one day, early the next, late the next, forgets to come to work the 4th day, on time the next. Who'd you have work for you, number 1 or number 2? Number 1. We love reliable people. Now, how do you demonstrate reliability? 2 quick ways. Number 1, gain a reputation for finishing what you start. We love people just getting things done, right? Just get it done. My academics here just finished their PhD. It's not a Word document, right? Just be done with it. Just get it done. All right, it's a really important thing. Some people can't finish things. How many of you are astounded how many people start things up and never finish them? But the second one's a little bit less obvious. Learn to master your very small commitments. The cornerstone of your credibility of trust is mastering small commitments. I do a leadership program for a bank called the Bank of Montreal. I go up there about once a quarter to do a one-day program with them. Done it for about 20 years now. When I first started doing it a number of years ago, after about the 3rd session, I got a phone call one day. Guy said, I'm such and such, I'm CEO of the bank. You are? Well, that's great. And I came to your program yesterday. You're the guy in the suit in the back. You got me. I said, what's up? He says, I enjoyed the program. I said, fantastic. He says, look, John, I have a favor for you I want you to ask. I said, what is it? I want you to do a second program for us. I said, what do you have in mind? He said, well, I don't really want a program. I don't know what I want. Basically, here's what happens right now in Canada. There are about 400 banks in Canada. In 20 years' time, there'll probably be 10. In 40 years' time, there'll be 3 or 4. Everything's got to consolidate in banking. If we don't become a big bank, we will die. My challenge is everyone in this bank right now thinks provincially. Some think nationally, but most people think provincially. I need my people to think bigger. I said, you want a seminar? Yeah, have them read a book, read some articles. I said, I can facilitate this kind of thing. He says, great, when can you do it? I say, before you do anything, though, I want to meet up with you and chat to make sure we're aligned. He says, splendid, when are you going to be up here again? I say, well, in about a month's time doing something up there. Why don't we have lunch that day? I volunteer. He said, John, I'm sorry, I'm on holiday the entire week. Can you come up earlier? It was the summertime. I said, sure, I can come up tomorrow if you want. He said, brilliant. Meet me at the Tim Hortons by the bank, Thursday morning, 7 o'clock. Tim Hortons is Dunkin' Donuts on steroids. We're supposed to meet for about 20 minutes. The conversation goes on for almost an hour. This guy is brilliant. Not just book brilliant, but savvy brilliant. At one point he says, remind me again, John, where you teach. And I said, the University of Texas. He says, the school in Austin. I said, yes, indeed. He says, you know, I think my niece went to university there. I said, really? Perhaps you had your class. I said, I don't know, there are 53,000 students there. He says, I will check. We talk for another 30 minutes. I go out to the airport. He goes back to work. Next morning, I get this express mail envelope from him. Little card inside. John, splendid chatting with you. Send proposal immediately. Want to approve before going on holiday. Best Jacques. Down the bottom, P.S. Talk to my niece after lunch. She did have your class. Enjoyed it. Good job. I know he's even talking about. That was 20 seconds in the midst of an hour-long conversation filled with substance. About 11 o'clock, I finally recalled what he was talking about, so I rang him up on the phone. I said, Jacques, thank you so much for the card. He says, I have no choice. What do you mean you have no choice? My grandmother would never give us presents if we didn't thank you note, so I got in the habit of it. No, what I liked was thinking about your niece. I had totally forgotten about that. He said, John, you asked me why I was so successful. I said, I always ask that question. Why are you so successful? I figured out something as we're talking. I believe I'm successful because I've mastered my small commitments. He said, I learned a long time ago in business, you got to keep your big commitments. You won't have a job otherwise, right? So what people notice when you keep your itty-bitty, teeny-weeny commitments, they never expect you to keep in the first place. He said, I've reached the point where I make commitments so I can keep them. How many there's some deep wisdom about that? How many of you love people who keep their small commitments? What's the second component of trust? You're honest. Let's be clear. Who's happily married here, by the way? You're not always honest. You wouldn't be happily married. All right? But an important thing is you must be honest, right? Now, how do we demonstrate honesty? Let me give you one tactic you use as a leader in the future. Put a lantern on your mistakes. When you make a mistake, fess up immediately. What kills leaders when it comes to crime issues is not the crime. They generally learn the crime. What kills them is the attempt to cover up. The drama at Volkswagen, the drama at General Motors is not about the mistakes they made. It's the attempt to cover up. Trust me, if you're a senior leader and there's a crisis on this campus, the first question you get from the media is, when did you know? We found out 2 weeks ago, we're telling you now, you are dead. We found out yesterday, we're telling you now, you're better off, aren't you? I learned this when I was 26 years old. Let me give you the context. Washington, D.C. area, I was 16 years old. Got my driver's license. After a few weeks of driving, my father one night said, you could take some friends out. So I grabbed 3 friends. We went to a movie in a place called Montgomery Mall, saw the movie, came back out afterwards. I got in the car, turned the car in, put the car in gear, punched on the gas pedal, and the car went backwards rather than forwards right into a lamp pole. Huge dent in the back of the car, huge bump in the trunk. I was 16 of my friends. I said, no big deal, don't worry. So we do what 16-year-old males do. We drove around D.C. for 3 hours going, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. We're quite a simple species. I finally dropped my friends off around 1 o'clock in the morning. I got home. Now, why would I wake my parents now? I'll tell them in the morning, I figure, when I get up, it's summertime, I figure around noon. I can woken up at 6:45 in the morning. What happened to the car? I'm not driving for almost 4 months. Because in my family, the rule at that point was, you break it, you pay for it. What gives me great angst and anguish to this day is 10 years to that summer, in oddly enough the same shopping center lot, my youngest sister, Kathy, did the identical thing. But this time, my father's treasured Volkswagen. Now, please understand, Backing a Volkswagen into a lamppost is a non-trivial event. What's in the back of the Volkswagen? It's in 1,000 little pieces. This car will never come back. But she is so much smarter than me, it pisses me off to this day. She finds the nearest phone and immediately calls home and goes, Mommy, Daddy, note the Y's, I was just in a car accident. And what do my parents immediately say? And it's something worthy of an Academy Award. She goes, I don't know. She's driving a new car 2 days later. Am I pissed? I'm pissed. I'm so stupid, she's so smart. You fess up, they don't get mad. Isn't that interesting? Third component, trust. You're a person of good faith. Now, what's this mean? It's hard to explain outside the States, but I'll think you get it. Good faith is a 3-word phrase I want you to tattoo on your desks when you go back to work. The phrase is this: don't be creepy. Does that work? How many of somebody is simply too creepy to trust? There's something wrong about them, okay? Let's drive to Cincinnati together. No, I got to stop in Georgetown for some friends. You got no friends there. But the thought of being in a car with them for an hour and a half, I don't think it's going to happen. Who's been on a plane before? You're seated. Somebody walks down the aisle and you go, God, please no. All right? Understand creepy. Now let me give you the academics description of it. The opposite of bad faith is good faith, and good faith is defined by what we call positive discretionary behaviors. You do more than people expect. You're a nice person. By the way, nice is not easy. Polite is easy. Nice takes work. Polite is I'll hold the door for when you're coming in after me. Nice is it's pouring rain outside. I see you carrying stuff in. I come out of the office, walk into the rain, and carry stuff in with you just because you need the help. Nice requires proactivity. What's an example of this? A friend of mine is a retired 4-star general, lives in Spokane now, okay? Big shot in the military for a number of years. We're having lunch a couple years ago, and he's going to brief the President of the United States at 1:30 in the afternoon at the White House. We are walking back towards the White House. Who's been around the White House in your life? You have Pennsylvania Avenue in front. It's no longer an avenue, but it looks like an avenue still, right? You always see families taking pictures out there. We go by the staff sergeant. He's taking pictures of his wife and 3 kids. Now the wife is coming out to change positions. We've all done these kind of pictures, right? What's my friend do? He's in his fancy uniform. What's he do anyway? He stops and says to the soldier, do you want me to take a picture of all 5 of you? Says, yes, sir, that'd be wonderful. How many think he's created a memory, number one, but also, how do you say, a nice person? He didn't have to stop, right? He's briefing the President of the States. He's a 4-star general, staff sergeant. Why would you do that? What a nice person, don't you? By the way, I kind of get the selfie culture, but how many have been in settings where people are trying to take a selfie of themselves and their partner with a little stick? How many feel kind of sad for them? You got no friends. You're so lonely. All right? Want to volunteer to take their picture? People say it's nice. Do me a favor. Do one nice thing a week over the next year. Fourth component of trust is you're vulnerable. Who's married here still? You trust your partner? Partner trusts you? One reason you trust each other is a little bit perverse. Either one of you know you can blow up for the other person. You can hurt the relationship, he can hurt the relationship, right? Now you wouldn't, but both of you have some vulnerability. Trust requires having something to lose. If one side can win and the other side can't win, guess what happens? There's never going to be trust. When you went to college, how many figured out the university kind of cared about you a tiny bit, but not that much? All right? I tell students, never trust the university. University will not intentionally screw you over, but it's a big bureaucracy, right? I tell them, always get an email summarizing any agreement you made in terms of courses, for example. Because why? Sometimes without knowing it, leadership changes and management changes, the rules change, and you have no evidence. I say, as a student, you're vulnerable. The university is not necessarily vulnerable. You've got to have some skin in the game, in short. Final component of trust is you're competent. How to explain competency? Very simple model. Who has had somebody help you fix a piece of electronics at home has never been the same since? Lovely person, nice person, reliable person simply could not manage expectations. Please don't overpromise people. Please don't overpromise people. I ask my undergraduates every year what pisses them off most about their parents. It's a good exercise, actually. I'm always fascinated because I'm a parent myself. By the way, the number one thing this year at UT is my parents didn't give me a second language. All right? But one of the most common ones that's come up for years and years and years is my parents built up my hopes and then shattered them. Who remembers told you you're going to Disney and you never went? All right? Your parents said, we're going to Disney this summer, and you end up going to some campground someplace, Great Smokies. How many understand that kind of bothered you? How many of you learned don't promise your kids anything until you've already got the tickets? All right? Otherwise, you've overpromised, you blow the relationship. Trust is the first thing leaders have to have. If you're not trusted, nothing else matters. Secondly, great leaders are great storytellers. Who's had a great boss at least once in your life? Who's had a great teacher once in your life? Who goes to church? Who goes to church sometimes? Every great leader, every great pastor, every great boss will have one thing in common. They're all extraordinarily good storytellers. How many think I'm right about that? Why? We are our stories. Ever thought about this? All of you have families. What is a family? Nothing more and certainly nothing less than a collection of stories. Your inheritance to your children won't be money or land you work for university. But the real gift you give your kids, I don't care how wealthy you become, is a collection of stories. Who does family reunions? The storytelling sessions, aren't they? Half the stories even true, but over 5 generations they became true. All right? Stories define families. Who has brothers or sisters? And on many important ways, you had different parents. I mean, I'm probably right about that. What connects you with your siblings is a set of shared stories. Now, you tell your sister, do you remember this happened? It was the funniest moment of my life as a child. Sister says, I don't remember that, but you were right there. I don't remember it. What bonds you is that set of stories you share in common. The time Dad went nuts in the car, all right? Those kind of stories. That everyone went through and everyone knows that. And you tell each other, you become a family again. Organizations are stories too. Who's new to UK? Who's new here? How long? You're beginning to be part of the place. But when you first joined, you went to lunch with other people. People said, do you remember this happened? Everyone goes, yeah, it was so funny. And you went, hee, because you know what they were talking about. No, if you ever want to build a team, you've got to build stories, don't you? Those stories define the team. It's the glue that holds together. Who played sports in high school? You don't remember your win-loss record, but you remember the funny moments, don't you? Time we left the coach behind. Why we call him Toots? All right? You have that. Who's been to reunions? What do? You talk the old stories, don't you? That's how you connect. Within 5 minutes' time, you're 16 years old again. Stories connect you, don't they? But stories do more than that. Stories are the way leaders communicate rules. I'm sure you have a bunch of rules in this campus, but the real rules oftentimes are not actually written down. You hear the story instead. Why she got fired, okay? Why she got transferred. Now, there's no necessary truth to it, but the story nonetheless what? Teaches people what the rules are. Rules are communicated most effectively by story. People get it when you tell a story. Many case studies, if that makes sense. But stories do something even more important than that. They help people get it. They help people get it. Who's been married for more than 6 weeks? Have you figured out you and your husband are going to have the same fights for the next 40 years? You give him the topic. It's topic number 3. He'll sulk for 3 weeks, then it'll be fine. If you want your spouse to understand why something's so important, do me a favor. Next time that fight happens, say, hold on, let me tell you why this matters so much. And they would talk about it, you go, now I get it. You tell a story about what happened, right? Who has some crazy family members? Who has some totally nutty family members? How many of family members even scare you sometimes they're so nutty? I had a bunch of them, all right? When I was a teenager, though, my father and mother started telling me why they were crazy. And not by biological things, but instead by their experiences. And those stories made me understand. I'm still scared of some of them, all right? But at least I kind of understand. I'll give you a personal one. I grew up in Europe till I was almost 10 years old. Moved back to Washington, D.C. My father had a very tough and demanding job, but he made a point to come home every night to take a walk with me. Supposedly for exercise, but we always ended up at Baskin-Robbins, the ice cream place. 30 flavors, hefting 2 was exercise. Now next to this Baskin-Robbins was a place that kept changing ownership. It quickly became a restaurant called the Wild Onion Restaurant. Age of 9 and something, I was absolutely sure it was the single stupidest name for a restaurant you could ever imagine. Why? My mother to cook with onions, and my chore at home was to peel and chop onions. Who's ever peeled and chopped an onion? It's no fun. I made jokes. People used to be crying with relief, your dad. Smell you, pee you. I had great fun making these jokes for an entire year. Next summer we go on holiday for a few weeks. We come back, we take a walk as we always did. I get my ice cream. I walk over to the restaurant. I see this giant white sign in front of it. It's a sign that says they're bankrupt. They're out of business. I start laughing. Dad, come look. The street is dry. The air smells so wonderful. He laughs with me. But as we're walking with him, he says, John, you probably should not laugh at that kind of stuff. And probably in a very snotty 10-year-old voice, I said, why not? Do you know what bankruptcy means? He says, yeah, it means they have no money. Yeah, but it means more than that. And I probably said, what? What it means, he says, John, is probably a couple, maybe a single person, saved up their money for 10 or 15 or 20 years. They go on a holiday like we did the last couple weeks. They saved up the money. They buy kids nice clothes like you have on. Now they saved up their money. And last year when they opened this restaurant up, it was probably the single proudest moment of their entire life. Tablecloths perfectly pressed, crystal perfectly clear. They beamed and said everything they ever wanted had come true. And now, John, every one of those dreams is gone and shattered. What's funny about that? I'll tell you something that drives my friends and my family nuts, and that's this. Whenever I travel, I don't like to go to chain restaurants. I love mom and pop places. I think you generally get better food. Sometimes you get sick, but I think you generally get better food. I think it's supporting something called hope and entrepreneurship. You and I are traveling one day. There's a Denny's and an IHOP, a Panera's and Arby's on this side. And guess what, a little mom and pop place here, and I drive in, do you understand so much better why after that story? I could have a PowerPoint slide saying entrepreneurship. How many of that story helps you get it? Stories have magnificent ability to communicate. I want all of you to become a storyteller. Now, what's they tell a story? First observation. Every story around the world follows exactly the same grammar. It's astounding. There are many different grammars for many different languages, but the grammar of stories is identical everywhere. Who's seen Finding Nemo? Let's analyze it. Setting, under the sea, Sydney, Australia, right? Main character is Nemo. The ditzy fish's name is? Dory. Bonus point, Dad's name is? Very good. Know the age of your kids, all right? It's a Disney movie. Mom gets killed in some hallway right at the beginning. Something very creepy happened to Walt's family. He does not like mothers. Never survive. Think about that. Think Bambi. All right? Understand, they always seem to go away, except evil stepmothers. Then what happens? They have goals, okay? Nemo to find his dad. Father to find Nemo, right? Obstacles. The shark. The dentist kid. Resolution. Nemo gets flushed. Lessons learned. Every TV show you see, every novel you read has exactly the same structure, right? It goes up like this with a climax at the end, right? But they have to overcome something. What are the ground rules of stories? Number one, stories have to be short. How many know people tell stories they're going for too damn long? They also have to have a point to them. How many know some stories don't have any point? How many of you listen to someone tell a story and say, what's the point? Who's been sober around a group of drunk people before? No, it's those two issues. No point to what they're saying. They're going relentlessly. Number three, you got to act like you care about the story. Whether you really do doesn't that matter that much, the research tells us, all right? We're not that good of detectives whether it really matters or not. What I mean, how many figure out your parents lied when you were kids? How many think every one of your parents lied to you sometimes? Absolutely. The point was, did it work? My mother, 95 years old, about a few months ago, okay? When we had a 90th birthday party, we had this huge event for her. One evening, the siblings went out with her, okay? 6 kids and her went out. And my little sister says at one point, Mom, who was that little kid who ran in front of her car and got smashed like a pancake? Mama says, what are you talking about? My brother says, you told me this story, all right? This little girl ran in front of this car, got hit by a truck and died, all right? I said, I'm the oldest. You told me this 1,000 times. She says, I don't remember doing that. Then she paused, lowered her breasts and said, but it worked. All right? As long as people believe you believe it, that's all that matters. So how do you find stories? People always ask, how do you find stories? Who wants to become a better storyteller? How many think I'm right? Storytelling matters. How do you find stories? Let me give you a couple ways to find stories. Number one, think of any values you have. Any value you have, there's a story behind. If you believe in honesty, there's a story. Either A, you're a pathological liar in high school, or you once saw honesty, dishonesty happen, you saw the consequences, good or bad. So how do these big shots walk in a room like this? They're 5 minutes before they're speaking. They have to give this great speech. They have no chance to prepare whatsoever. How come they're always eloquent? They figure out a story to tell. So somebody's going to be talking after me. They're going to be talking and they have no chance to prepare whatsoever. They're walking across campus. What value do I want to communicate? Students, safety, curiosity, innovation, trust. They latch on one value and then they think to themselves, when did I learn how important that was? When did I learn that was a critical value? And thus they find the story. If you have no values, what do? Start using the phrase, for example. Every time you say, for example, what are you forced to do automatically? Come up with a story. It's simple. Think how your views and things have changed. How many of your opinions about some things have changed over your lifetime? How many of you are less sure about some things, more sure about other things, right? Sometimes you have a story that teaches this. When I was in college, a girlfriend and I decided to go to France, southern France, just for fun. We got the cheapest tickets we could find. We bought bikes when we got to France. Now, we bought the really cheap bikes. They were rusted, all right? We started riding around southern France. About the 5th day, we're sitting at some cistern in a very small village, filling up our canteens in those days, all right? I get back on my bike, and literally speaking, the back rim just bends over. Yeah. We're sitting on the ground trying to fix it, okay? I'm holding the rim, she's pushing spokes in. It is not gonna work. Little French lady comes over. What's going on? We show her. She says, oh, that's bad. Yeah, it is bad. I said, the bike store in town. She goes, no bike store. We're a small town. There's one in Avion, about 40, 50 kilometers that way. A friend of mine runs it. Well, we'll go there. Says, no, you won't. What? It's after 3. They're closed today. Well, okay, we'll go tomorrow. She starts walking away. Then she comes back and says, where do you guys stay? We have blankets. We have sleeping bags. We have a tent. We just sleep in a yard or a forest. Says, no. Tonight you stay with me. She fed us probably the best French dinner I've ever had in my entire life, and for sure the worst French breakfast I've had in my life. Then she put my bike on the top of her little Renault car and drove us to Avion. Woke up the guy who ran the bike store, had him fix it, but really cheap deal she worked up for us, drove us back. Anyone says French people are cold, unkind, insensitive people, I say I beg to differ. How many times I just told you a story, didn't I? Stories work that way. Now some of you say I can't tell stories. What I want you to do instead, collect interesting factoids. Little factoids have the same impact as stories told well. Who's my managers here again? Who's my managers? One of the most important skills any manager has to have is protect the brand name of their team. You got to market your team every day. How many said anything done in this university can be outsourced? Decision to outsource is not based on performance alone, but the reputation of the organization. As a manager, here's my assignment. Next couple of days, I want you to collect 20 interesting factoids about your business, whatever it is. And every time a big shot comes through, I want her or him to leave knowing one of those little factoids. Who's taking a tour of a park or a museum? What do you remember? The stories and the factoids, don't you? Little facts have the same impact. So I work sometimes as a consultant kind of person with a healthcare chain in California, Los Angeles. Their CEO is a former physician. She gave up medicine a number of years ago. She literally burned out. What happens, she is interesting. When she is doing a big organizational move, she doesn't bring big consultancies in. She instead brings professors in. She has cadres of them from around the world. Finance issue, a guy from NYU, a guy from Columbia, a guy from INSEAD. People stuff she sometimes brings me in. Now she was doing a major change initiative maybe 6-7 years ago now. We're having dinner one night. I'm out there working with her team. I say to her, McKinsey is really expensive, but they're very good at change. Accenture has this huge change management practice. Why did they bring us 4 professors in instead? John, what did I do before I was an administrator? You're a physician. What kind? She actually was a dermatologist by training, went back to school and became a plastic surgeon. She trained in San Antonio. Her specialty was grafting skin on burn victims. I can't imagine it. What happened, she had learned something very early in my fellowship. If I take me skin off your leg, plan your arm, it will take in about 80% of the cases. Take me skin off your leg, plant on my arm, it can reject it in about 90% of the cases. If it doesn't get rejected, you'll be taking anti-rejection drugs for the remainder of your life. John, I could bring Accenture, I could bring McKinsey in, but it would be their change. By having you guys work with our teams, it becomes our change. She could have simply said organic change is better than externally imposed change, but how many of that little factoid about surgery and grafting skin stuck in my mind to this day? Third thing leaders are good at, they create loyalty. They create loyalty. They're trusted, they're great storytellers, but they also create a deep sense of loyalty. People want to be around them. Now let me give you the overarching thing we discovered about this. Who's been married for more than 10 years? To the same person. And your partner still gives you your birthday present and a holiday present every year. How long have you been married? 20 years? Husband's name is? Cameron, you remembered. Good. All right, very good. And Cameron gives you a birthday present every year, right? And a holiday present every year. Now in this room, Vegas rules apply, all right? What's said in this room doesn't leave this room. I'm going to make this easy for you. What did Cameron give you for your birthday 9 years ago? Oh, I'll make it easier. Holiday season 7 years ago. 4 years ago for your birthday. Last holiday season? Last holiday season? How romantic. All right. Next year's the vacuum cleaner. All right. Yeah, how many of you are amazing you remember last holiday season? Who can I remember last holiday season? Birthday presents, holiday presents are what we call calculated rewards. We expect them, and nothing special except when we don't get them. And then we remember for years and years and years about the one time they forgot. Am I right about this? Look, somebody working for you, they do a great job. You say thank you. You better say thank you. If you don't say thank you, guess what? You're an evil person. But thank you gets you really nothing. It just avoids bad news. Like that chair got him nothing, but it avoided bad news, right? Yeah, you asked for God, he's such a romantic guy, okay? But you expected it, in short. You were happy, kind of, but not that happy. You certainly were not unhappy, but you weren't necessarily ecstatic about it because you expected it already. Let me ask you this. What would count more from Cameron? A birthday present, a holiday present, or shall we say this weekend, you and he are walking through a shopping center, and he says, just a second, and he runs into a candy store or a florist shop, comes up with some candy or flowers for you, says, most wonderful wife a fellow could ever have. Thanks for the first 20. I can't wait for the next 20. First you go, what have you been doing, or what do you want? But after you got done debriefing, you'd remember because it's what? Spontaneous. The rewards people treasure are the spontaneous rewards. We like surprises. Am I right about this? Now here's the take I want you to remember. There's a lot of planning involved in spontaneous rewards. A lot of planning involved in spontaneous rewards. Let me give you a few examples of spontaneous rewards to think about. Example, now there's 4 or 5 things we discover leaders do regularly. 1, recognize people in unexpected places. Who's had a school teacher recognize you many years after you're in their class in a shopping center, for example? Look at you, all grown up, not in jail. How'd that ever happen? We like it when people recognize us, don't we? Footnote, don't recognize people in places neither one of you is supposed to be at. Some of you are laughing far too hard at this moment. All right? Second thing, make yourself important to the most important people in the world. Now, I've known this person back here for many years. Never met Cameron before. One night at the summer reception, Cameron gets dragged to the reception mostly because one car's in the garage. Who do I spend my time talking to? Remember, I've known her for years, never met her husband before. Who do I spend my time talking to? Cameron. My goal is by the time they leave that night, Cameron will say, that guy John seems like a nice guy. You always make yourself important to the people who matter. How many of your moms or dads took you to work with them sometimes when you were a kid? Understand, some people said, oh my God, brat, Lisa, rugrat, keep the kid away from me. And other people deeply had fun with you, didn't they? Let you play on their computer or typewriter, had candy, had a toy. Now your mother gets very successful, but sadly she has to lay off some people someday. Who's she most likely to protect? The person who's nice to her kids, right? Be nice to people who matter to them. Thirdly, appreciate what people do for you, even if it's not what you want. This is one of the most difficult challenges leaders face. People work extraordinarily hard doing something you didn't want in the first place. You got to appreciate it, even if it's not what you wanted. What's the case point in this one? Who has little kids? Who's had any kids, by the way? How many of you drawings they made on the wall at home? Hung on the wall? How many figure out you're stuck with them until you move out of that house many years from now? You can never take them down. Let's be clear, it's not Picasso quality art. Your kid went like this, and you said, this is beautiful. You hung on the wall, and now you're stuck with it. Who doesn't have kids yet? This is going to make the entire 3-day session worth it. If you ever have kids, remember this. Anytime your child draws you a picture, look at it and say, this is fantastic. Let's send to grandma right now. You have a much nicer house. But no one in the right mind would ever tear up a kid's picture in front of them. But some poor managers tear people's pictures right in front of them. Am I right about this? You got to appreciate it. Who has family members who give you the oddest gifts that you can never even re-gift to somebody else? Who fits that category? All right? I want you to remember, think about this. How many think most people in this campus are reasonably normal people most of the time? Okay, some faculty maybe not, but how many think most people in this campus are reasonably normal people most of the time? Normal people never do or say anything that would be wrong. They actually want to please people most of the time. So that weird aunt who gives you a holiday present you would never wear, what's the routine? You got to thank her profusely. Wear that weird sweater around the house for an hour or so when she's there. As soon as she leaves, you put it in the Goodwill bag, right? But you've got to appreciate it when she gives it to you. But it's not simply being fake about it. Let me tell you what you need to do. She gives you that sweater. You give it away. 5 months from now, she's visiting. You say, let's go shopping. You go out shopping a couple places. You buy something in one store and say, this is my favorite store. I love this store. I can almost bet you any amount of money next year she'll buy something from that store. You see, she's buying something she really like. No one wants to buy something to give away, right? She's trying to please you. So you appreciate what they do when they do it, but you guide them later on about what you want instead without saying you didn't like the first thing, right? It's hard to do sometimes. Another characteristic, show up things that matter to people. Leaders have to show up. Your campus president has to show up at 100 different events on a monthly basis he or she really doesn't want to go to. They got to shake hands, kiss babies, never confuse the two, right? Understand, if you don't show up, people will notice. Being there doesn't get you much, but you got to show up. How do we know this? Birthday party. Who remembers college? You had to go to that party a friend was holding, if you didn't want to go, right? If you're not there, people noticed. Now, showing for birthday parties is important, but showing for other things too. Who's had young kids? You went to more soccer games and school plays than you ever want to go to your entire life, right? And when you showed up, your kid dissed you. They see you sitting what? Over here, for example, right? They see you sitting over here, what do? They immediately move this way, don't they? You move over here, they move that way. Soccer games. Who's been in these horrible kids' soccer games? 7 in the morning to 7 at night. It's a cold, awful day all right outside. You stand there for 12 hours. The ultimate secret of any parent is, thank God they lost, we don't have to come back tomorrow. All right? But your child comes running over, you say, let's go get pizza, and your son says, no, I'm going home with her, and he see you tomorrow, Dad, bye. If you're not there, do they notice though? Now here's the footnote to remember. It's nice when you show up for people's birthdays, for events, but one thing you have to show up with every time as a leader is you've got to go to loved ones' funerals. How many I'm probably right about that? What we discovered about great leaders, they understand the incredible value of funerals in terms of building relationships. All of us have lost people. You always remember who came to the funeral, don't you? You may not remember who came to your wedding. You may not remember who came to a birthday party. Always remember the funeral. George Clooney is really a nice guy. A friend of mine works with him, okay, a lot. George Clooney has a group of about 12 guys he's hung out with since high school, in Cincinnati, by the way, some of them, all right? They're spread out throughout the country now, all right? But every couple of years, they run a Winnebago, go across the country doing what guys will do at that age, drinking, smoking cigars, and that kind of stuff, telling stories. A couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago now, all right, one of his friends was coming out to California, lived in New Jersey. Calls Clooney up and says, I can't be there. What do you mean? We're having a party tomorrow. You're supposed to be. I got room reserved for you already in my house. George, I can't come. My dad just died. Oh my God, your dad died. That's horrible. He says, yeah, it was expected. It's a blessing in many ways. Okay, it went on a long time. Okay, he's at peace now. Well, what can I do for you? Nothing. I'll be fine. Give me a few weeks. I'll be fine. No, I want nothing, George. It's fine. Look, I'll visit California soon. What Clooney does is he hangs up the phone and starts calling his friends around the country. Says to one, I'll be in San Francisco in 2 hours with my plane. I'll be in Denver in 3 hours' time. I'll be in Chicago in 5 hours' time. He collected all 11 guys. Next morning at the services, okay, 8 o'clock in the morning, the guy whose dad died was sitting up in front, turns around and sees his 11 best friends in the back of the room. How many say it was a cool thing to do? How many think he remembers that much more than going to Academy Awards when you think about it, right? You got to show up things that matter to people. It's a really important skill. The fourth characteristic of leaders is you have a strong sense of purpose. You have a strong sense of purpose. Purpose matters. Purpose matters. We're seduced by purpose. Have you ever thought about this? How many of you had someone who's met a person on a missionary zeal to do something? Passion is seductive, all right? They deeply believe in what they're doing, and that sense of purpose attracts people to them over a period of time. Purpose matters. Because here's the deal. All the motivation in the world without a sense of purpose gets you nowhere. There's a very famous sports story about the University of Illinois many, many years ago. They had a football team, all right? They were playing Notre Dame one cold day in November. Notre Dame had this field house in those days. One side the visitors' locker room, the other side a swimming pool. What happens, they're losing at halftime, Illinois is losing at halftime, all right? Coach brings them back and starts motivating these guys. You can do it, you can do it, we're gonna win this game, get on and fight. As the clock ended, he said to his players, okay, all of you now, I want you to run through these double doors right now and beat Notre Dame. Every player, manager, coach leaped out of their chairs, ran to those double doors, and right into the swimming pool. Okay? All of the motivation in the world without a sense of direction gets you nowhere. Now, here what we discover about motivation is important. When you're motivating somebody, you got to motivate people about the result, about the payoff of the result, the so what of the result. How many understand University of Kentucky's primary motivation is probably students? Am I right about this? You want to do good for students. That defines the campus. That's the motivation. Everything needs to connect in some way, matter, form for that, right? But it's not something we're doing for students. We're going for the so what about that. No one loves your product. They love what the product does for them. Who's old enough, experienced enough, seasoned enough to remember the slide rule? Thank God. All right? What killed the slide rule? Calculator. 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 Well, yours was yellow. Mine was gray. Okay, gray and black. GI. Okay? Understand, What killed the calculator slide rule was the calculator. TI introduced the TI-54 5-function calculator. The square root was the sexy function. Remember this? How did the slide rule decide to compete? They used a round slide rule. How stupid can you be? No one wanted a slide rule. They want what the slide rule did for them, calculated. Now, who's laughing and say, I don't remember the slide rule? Who feels good about yourself? Okay, do you remember the typewriter? Name the big typewriter companies just 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Remington, Rand, Underwood, IBM, Smith Corona. Smith Corona had 61% of market share in the United States. Their stock was over $90 a share. They're bankrupting on today. No one ever wanted a typewriter either. What do they want the typewriter to do for them? Come on, you tell me. Put words in meaningful form, storageful, right? No one cared about the typewriter. IBM, you mentioned, had a typewriter business. They had a great typewriter business, which they killed in favor of something called the Slaptrick initially. Remember little metal balls? Then something called display writer. Then the PC. Then the laptop. And IBM got rid of the laptop business about 7 years ago, didn't they? They never loved their product. They loved what the product did for folks. No one buys a milkshake. They buy a milkshake to do something for them, right? What is the purpose of college? Education is like saying calculating, isn't it? By the way, how many think education is going to change radically in the next 100 years, 50 years? It's bound to change in some ways, right? Understand, no one really cares about classrooms. No one actually cares even about education. What do they care about? What education can do for them, right? Give them better lives. You always fall in love with the thing that the service function as opposed to the product is. Because if you fall in love with the classroom, and by the way, my campus, I don't know about this campus, we're having a real estate, we have cranes everywhere, okay? We're building things over and over again. How many of you kind of wonder about that a little bit? How many of your grandkids probably won't come to campuses the way we come to campus now in some ways? We have no idea what's going to happen. But how many think learning is going to change? If we love learning, we're doing one thing. If we love buildings, we're doing differently, aren't we? Understand, no one cares about the hospital, they care about health. Any fundraising development people here? There's an old development story. You go to a potential donor. You say, I need $50 million to build a hospital. You say, I need $50 million to cure cancer. Which one's you going to give money to? Always the so what. Final characteristic, though, about leaders, and this is the fifth one, and perhaps the most important one. Great leaders exude optimism. We hate Eeyores in our lives. Leaders have to be madly optimistic sometimes, don't they? It's like that story of David and Goliath in the Bible. Remember the story? David's a real short guy, small guy. This giant called Goliath comes up. David's troops take one look at him and said, my God, he's so big we can never kill him. And they run away in fear. Leaving little David all by himself. What does he say? My God, he's so big I can't miss. And he wins the day, doesn't he? Optimism is one of the most important skills. You'll live long with optimism, but who's had to work for a pessimistic person? They drive you crazy. Who's worked with someone who's madly optimistic and you kind of laugh at them sometimes, but it's still fun, isn't it? Now, how do you get this kind of optimism? One way is to learn as a leader to reframe things. What's reframing mean? There's this wonderful story told years ago about this man in a small town. He has a small business. One day his best customer comes and says, I'm opening a new plant down the road tomorrow. He says, well, fantastic. As soon as this customer leaves, he calls the florist up and says, I want you to get this giant bouquet of flowers for my single best customer, and on top of it, you say, good luck in your new location. Next door, he's waiting for a call. No phone rings for a while. About 11:30, the phone rings. It says customer, and she is raving mad. What are you mad about? You sent me flowers. I know I did. But they say, R.I.P., rest in peace. You think my company's going to die? Why would you do this? And I says, oh my gosh, the florist made a mistake. Let me get right back to you. He rings up the florist and says, what have you done? Florist on the computer says, we certainly made a mistake, but think about it this way, sir. There's some poor guy 6 feet under with this giant bouquet of flowers on top that says, good luck in your new location. Sometimes you simply frame it differently and everything goes differently. How many said you can frame things as good or bad things? It's your choice. Now, some of you say, I'm not good at framing. What do I do instead? You learn to label things differently. You label things positively as opposed to negatively. Who likes roller coasters here? Who enjoys roller coasters? I've seen you before on a roller coaster. Who does not like roller coasters very much? Very good. Let me share what these two people do every time they go on a roller coaster. You get on, you go, this is going to be great. I cannot wait. This is going to be fantastic. Roller coasters go up, you start comparing your notes, right? Yes, you Hershey Park. Kingston, you won't believe this. As the roller coaster apex, what do? Ah, like this, right? I knew I'd seen you before. Would you do me one small favor next time you roller coaster? It won't hurt, I promise, all right? I want you to sit down, put the brace on. As you're going up, as you approach the apex, I want you to say one phrase to me 3 times. The phrase is this: I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I want you to know the rust of the roller coaster. I want you to find out what the term mental fatigue actually means. 1 in a million that can actually happen, okay? If it's a wood roller coaster, the 3-letter word ROT has meaningful consequences. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? You get close, I'm going to die, I'm going to get sick, this is crazy. But here's the discovery made years ago. There's very modest physiological differences between fear and excitement. Both of you have sweaty palms, you say, I better cool these hands off. You go, oh my God, I may slip out. Both of you have stomachs, you say, I'm excited, you say, I'm going to get sick. There's literally no difference between excitement and fear in many cases. So what you've got to do is learn to label things positively and not negatively. Who's rode Southwest Airlines before? I was a flight years ago flying into Dallas, Texas. The plane hit the ground harder than any time I've ever seen a plane in my life before. Half the luggage rack popped. It was a horrible landing, all right? It was amazing. We're taxiing, creaking Lily over to the airport gate, right, okay? And the flight attendant gets on the microphone and says, folks, I got an announcement. And we listened. The first time in aviation history, everyone listened. I want you to know that wasn't the pilot's fault. That wasn't the flight attendant's fault. That was the asphalt. We all laughed. Oh, they went by the pilot saying, interesting asphalt. She labeled it more positive, didn't she? And you say, I cannot do this. Then you can engage in what psychologists call priming. Do me a favor. All together, what do the words HI spell? Come on, louder. Come on, loud. Really loud. Scare people on campus. Hi. H-O. H-I. H-O. Say all 4 together. There we go. Now say it with feeling this time. 1, 2, 3. Hi-ho. Hi-ho. I have a dream this week with a theme song in Kentucky, all right? I imagine your president followed by your vice president licking shoulders. Hi-ho, hi-ho. It's up. Why? You have a choice. You can go hi-ho, or you can go oh-we-oh-we, oh-we-oh. Who's been in an office at this university you say, I never want to work there? It sounds like oh-we-oh. Who's been in an office that I could work there? Hi-ho, hi-ho. Literally, you can talk yourself into that, we discovered. If you smile, you'll feel happier. How many learned this lesson? It's a wonderful little study done a few years ago. If you put your pen between your lips for 5 minutes, you'll feel depressed for the rest of the day. If you put it between your teeth, you'll feel happy for the rest of the day. Because why? Different muscular structures, right? When you think about it, you can really fake yourself to feel happy. How many of you had a bad morning home, you play a certain kind of music, coming to work, you feel better afterwards, don't you? My leaders here, how many of you are on show every time you walk into the building? You got to act happy even when you're not. A friend of mine now stepped down from Congress a few years ago. Fascinating guy. Beautiful speaker. I asked him one time, how are you such a good speaker? He says, I listen to the Lion King theme song every morning when I go to work. You can mention this stuff too. All right, 5 things we know leaders do. I could go on for a whole semester, all right? Helpful stuff? Can use some of this stuff. What questions do you have at this point? You want to get out of it. Let me give you one piece of advice, though. Do not be upset about this, okay? But I'll tell you something in the future I want you to work on. I don't mind. I teach college. I never get questions. I'm used to that, okay? But if you really want to be successful, you've got to learn to ask questions better. What do I mean by that? How many think networking is important at universities? Networking is everything, isn't what you think about. Networking is absolutely crucial. Who's heard the phrase, it's who you know that matters? All right? How many think it's true? It's untrue. It's who knows you. Think about that. Networking is a way of getting to meet people and making sure they remember you. One trick, asking questions. But let's see if you learn anything today. Let's see if you learn anything today. I want to apply this knowledge. Let's see. I want everyone to pair up. Everyone get a partner. I'll be your partner, okay? Everyone get a partner. Let's see if you learned anything about leading this morning so far. And if you don't do it the right way now, we can fix it later on. Don't worry, all right? Everyone get a partner. I'll be your partner. I want one person each partnership to say, I am partner A. One person be A in each partnership. I'll be A, all right? I'll be A, I'll be A. A, put your hand up like this. A, put your hand up like this. A, make a tight fist like this, please. A, take the tight fist and put it close to the face of partner B. Dream come on, get up. Dream come true in a few cases. Get the fist up there. Come on, get up there. Partner B, your job. Get partner A's fist open as fast as you can. Get my fist up, get my fist up. Stop, release, let her go, free her. Let her go, release. How many of you turned to your partner and said, would you please open your fist? The first time you use your leadership skills, what must you do? Go to violence and force. But what happened to that fist when you try to get open? It go what? Make my day. Why not ask first? You always torture later on. Now, I did this in D.C. many years ago with a very fancy group of people. One guy named Ron Brown, you probably don't remember, did something amazing. We did this exercise. He didn't force the fist open. He didn't beg to get the fist open. He turned to his partner and said, what would it take for you to want to open that fist for me? I thought it was brilliant. Rather than forcing, rather than begging, why don't we try seduction? No, not that kind of seduction. Who's had a great boss, a great teacher once in your life? You didn't want to disappoint them. I always tell leaders two things. Make sure people aren't disappointed. And here's the ultimate conclusion. If you do everything I told you about, you are working for tips. And how many think every great leader works for tips every day? How many understand tips matter, don't they? Now, you can't be paid, but I want you to go home each night and say, what did I do today? That if somebody had to pay me like in a restaurant, they'd give me a big tip. You'll certainly be a better leader for those things than having what? Loyalty, stories, trust, sense of purpose, and optimism all get you that great tip. That's what we've talked about today. Have a great conference, okay? Enjoy it. Thank you so much. Great. Oh, boy.
We have it on good information that this long, tall Texan enjoys a little bourbon.
I do enjoy bourbon.
So we're giving him today a new book by Kentucky Press called The Birth of Bourbon.
The Birth of Bourbon. Thank you. And by the way,
oh, there we go.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks. Have a good time here, okay? I think there might be free food out there. Free food always tastes better.